Just want to make sure that folks can see that. Can folks see that? Okay. So I've been asked this evening to talk a little bit about Metro 2040, our regional growth strategy, and we're in the midst of updating that, and how has COVID impacted our learnings around long-range planning, and what concepts remain relevant, if not critical, as Jennifer was talking about, which ones require a radical rethink, and what lessons do we need to incorporate. So I'm going to start, if I could, just by giving you a quick sense of who regional planning is. This is a group of planners at the region who really work hard to support planning throughout the region. So that's with regards to our utilities planning, our member jurisdictions planning, TransLink, and other regional agencies. Their kind of raison d'etre is about the regional growth strategy. And I think of the team pretty much as stewards of that. You know, it's really reminding our member jurisdictions and others that we've signed on to a vision for how to manage growth in this region. And we also just do that by providing a whole host of core services. And the first really is about providing projections. So we look out 20, 30, 50 years and provide projections for population, housing, employment, etc. We provide policy research to support planning throughout the region, and other core services as shown here. So Metro 2040 is essentially the regional federation's vision for how to manage growth in a way that really reflects the values of the federation. It was adopted in 2011, and it has a really high bar when it comes to adoption. Every single member jurisdiction council, so 21 municipalities, 1 treaty First Nation, and an electoral area, all sign on to this. Adjacent regional districts, so Fraser Valley and Squamish-Lillooet, TransLink, and Metro Vancouver. So it is a bylaw, and it is signed by all of those folks. Has some core principles that far precede this particular plan, that are kind of contingent on what you've already from Jennifer and from Mayor Stewart. But I'm putting them up there to kind of double down on the kinds of things that Jennifer was talking about. These are the things that work. And our regional growth strategy is sort of centered around ensuring that we do put growth in the right places to a network of urban centers around the region and along transit corridors. It's centered around protecting important lands, our food lands, our ecologically important lands, our job lands, with a focus on industrial. And it's really also about supporting our member jurisdictions as they set out to create amazing communities throughout the region, providing diverse and affordable housing, supporting better mobility. And I would also say that there's the flip side of urban containment is around ensuring that we can provide a lot of urban infrastructure efficiently. So sewer and water service, transit, etc. So back about 1.5 years ago, our board gave us direction to take on a comprehensive update to Metro 2040. It'll be called Metro 2050. But it really was seen as an update. So this is around building on success. This is about really working from a strong foundation of those principles, and a recognition that the bulk of the strategy is working well. But we do need to extend it out to 2050. We do need to ensure that we're working hand in glove with TransLink as they update their regional transportation strategy, because we always joke that a good transportation strategy is a good land use plan, and vice versa. And after 10 years of implementation, there's really an opportunity to fill some gaps and to really put an emphasis on climate action, on social equity, on making sure we're building affordable housing near transit, etc. And all of these issues, as already spoken about tonight, are accentuated in the kinds of environment that we're in today as a result of COVID and other issues. So as Mayor Stewart noted, we had a whole host of issues kind of building up to this, and then in March, COVID happened, and what we started to hear, as Jennifer alluded to as well, is you know, there's these conversations about, wow, why should we be planning for the long term when such major unforeseen things can happen with massive impacts, and what does this mean for cities, and will the ability to work from home actually mean that people will live in different places and travel in different ways? And so as a result of that, our board tasked us to go back and say, what does this mean for Metro 2050? And we came back and said, you know, we don't want this to become a COVID response plan, because then it'll be outdated in a couple of years. But we can really build things like COVID and the pandemic into ensuring that we build a resiliency lens. And as we've heard tonight, as we've peeled back some of our learnings in the last 6 months, it's become imperative to really look at an equity lens as well. We also were tasked to redeploy our resources to support emergency and recovery planning throughout the region. Metro Vancouver struck a COVID-19 response task force, and this is comprised of all of the mayors in our region. And they really have two roles right now. One is to guide Metro Vancouver's actions and responses. We still are providing services around water provision, sewer provision, affordable housing, etc. But it also provides the mayors an opportunity to connect and share information about how they are addressing recovery in each of their communities. Regional planning provides data on a monthly basis for housing with regards to job loss and recovery, mobility challenges and patterns, and land use markets. We've also provided some population growth scenarios to kind of give a sense of what a tampered immigration means for a couple of years with regards to long-term growth. And Jennifer actually has presented to the COVID response task force with regards to the 2020 declaration. And we're looking for ways to embrace that in this region and find ways to embed some of the actions of the declaration into the regional growth strategy update. So I'm just going to go back for a second to why bother planning to kind of follow on Jennifer's comments. And we have to look back a ways, but we've often heard throughout history, whether it's Winston Churchill or Dwight D. Eisenhower, the plan itself is not the important part, it's the planning. The tangible thing that we create is vulnerable to a lot of disruptors and forces that are outside of our control. But planning, of course, is about exploring and thinking. It's about looking at variables and raising your awareness and giving you a more complete and useful perspective. And so in this world of fluidity and fairly great uncertainty, I think it's imperative to look at planning not as a prescriptive activity, but as a resiliency building activity. It's a guidance tool. For us in regional planning, it's really essential to create common objectives and common goals because we're working across many boundaries to address some really complex challenges. So we cross boundaries, whether it's jurisdictional or geographic or generational, and those common goals are essential towards collective action. Planning, of course, helps us hedge bets when it comes to uncertainty. It helps us build resiliency. It encourages innovation and gets us thinking about intersectionality. Jennifer talked about the 4 kind of crises that are at a cross point right now, and it's an opportunity to really think about all of those together. When we do our projections, we do a trend forward analysis. We do look and say what's been happening with regards to population and what do we know about today and what can that tell us about the future. But we also, by definition, do scenario-based planning. And we want to look at a myriad of factors that are beyond our control, such as automation and technology, geopolitical shifts, and so on. These are things that dramatically shape our region's future, but in ways that we can't always reliably predict. And all of these kinds of actions or external forces can have impacts on how we grow, how people move, where they live, and how they get around. And so again, that scenario-based planning is an opportunity to manage uncertainty and to identify strategies that'll work in a whole variety of circumstances. So for me tonight, when I was thinking about what kinds of planning concepts remain relevant, what kinds of things require a radical rethink, where do we need to double down, I have 3 observations and 1 conclusion. So my first observation is that humans are creatures of habit. And we've talked about how cities have been had a gravitational pull for many years. And whether that's despite world wars or whether that's about natural disasters or other pandemics, we gravitate to these places because if done properly, and Jennifer talked a little bit about the ways that cities have failed as well, but if done properly, these are incredible outcomes that come out of our cities. We have quantifiable physical, mental, and emotional health outcomes. We create innovation hubs. We have amazing neighborhoods with good connection. We have access to culture and artistic diversity. And as humans, we do connect positive feelings with familiarity. So my sense is that we will continue to move towards urbanism. My second observation really is that, wow, as a species, we're really uncomfortable with discomfort. And I'm going to just give a bit of an anecdote with regards to that. About 2 years ago, Metro Vancouver and TransLink embarked on developing long-range growth and transportation scenarios. And how we did that is we took a look at a whole host of external forces. Some of them are just listed on the left-hand side of your screens. Taking a look at how these things that we don't have a lot of control over as local governments will impact our region. And that's the axis, the vertical axis. And then also, how certain are we about how they will unfold in our region? And we kind of high-graded three main areas around climate change, global economy and trade, and automation and technology as the ones that were really the outliers that we don't have a lot of sense about how they're going to unfold in particular, but we know they're going to have high impacts. And around that, we created 4 different scenarios. And some of the scenarios really were about, like, what happens if automation is great and we end up with a green economy and everybody can work from home and everything looks rosy and population growth is managed. And everyone that we participated in our process thought this was a great, desirable future. But when we started to look at things like what happens if there's global economic collapse, what happens if we close our borders and we see zero population growth, there was a real discomfort in including these as scenarios, let alone embracing them as things to really look closely at. And I guess my point in that is it's challenging to have the courage and the vulnerability in planning to stay with discomfort, to include discomfort, to make sure we're including dissenting voices, because it really makes that planning practice so much stronger. My third observation is that, and it's also been noted this evening, is, wow, do we ever have adaptive capacity when there's an immediately present crisis? And I think that pivot really is the word of 2020. You know, it was very early in the pandemic that we were tasked to redefine our sense of what an essential worker is. We were really grabbing onto the fact that, you know, it's almost a trope right now, but that we have all in the same storm, but in different boats. So really acknowledging that, as again was noted tonight, that Indigenous and racialized and low-income people are experiencing this pandemic in a very different kind of way than others. And that really leads us to this willingness to have hard conversations that can lead to new policy. And that links back into the declaration. But we also saw some incredible pivots where we all stood on our patios at 7 p.m. every night and applauded and thanked our essential workers and sought hope together. We saw rapid repurposing of hotels to address homelessness issues. We saw the reconfigured public space immediately and streets taken over to create public space. And Jennifer talked about the cycling infrastructure and how fast that happened. So in an immediate crisis, we definitely have that ability. But then that brings me down to the punchline for me, and it's a bit of an oxymoron, but it's really about doubling down and being flexible at the same time. And what I mean by that is doubling down on those fundamental planning principles, and that reflects what Jennifer's talking about, diving deeper into urbanism. They work, so we're still containing growth, we're putting growth in the right places, we're protecting important lands, but we do need to differentiate between doing that well, which is good density, and differentiate that from crowding. So from my perspective, good density is a planning issue, crowding is a social equity issue, and maybe we can explore that in the panel a bit. I think it's important for us to be vulnerable and embrace this uncertainty and embrace discomfort and ensure that we include it in work that we're doing, because that enables us to make those big moves in policy, and particularly around social equity issues. And I would also heighten the urgency of these issues right now and acknowledge that now is the moment. And I look forward to questions as well. Thanks.